The SR Performance Sport coilovers here are currently the most affordable in the category for the 2015 and newer non-MagnaRide Mustang to offer both height and dampening adjustment. Now the SR Sports will offer a drop range from 1 to 3 inches, while the dampers themselves will be 32-way adjustable, allowing owners to either soften or stiffen the ride quality depending on your tastes. Now price point for these affordable coils will land right in that mid $700 range, while the install, according to the site, will get a soft 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, take about 4 hours or less to complete from start to finish. But if you hang with me till the end of the video, we'll show you how it's done. So if you're browsing for inexpensive coilovers for your S550 Mustang, then chances are the SR Performance options here are probably going to be one of your most appealing when it comes to bang for your buck. Now there are 2 different coilovers currently on the site from SR Performance, including the sports that we have here, in addition to a separate set that will be a little bit more expensive, about 150 bucks give or take. Now both are going to offer height and dampening adjustment, but those more expensive coils from SR will make the adjustment a little bit easier through an included or installed knob on each damper, whereas the sports here simply include this little key that you have to go around and make your adjustments individually. Now secondly, the more expensive SR coils will feature a slightly firmer spring rate compared to the sports here, which might lend themselves to those owners out there who prefer maybe a little bit more handling performance over, say, a more comfortable ride. But now that you know the difference, let's get into the SR Sports a little bit more. And honestly guys, there's a lot to like about these budget-friendly coilovers. First and foremost, you have your height adjustment, right? Which is kind of always the big draw of going with a coilover as opposed to a set spring. And the Sports are gonna offer anywhere between 1 to 3 inches of drop, which will essentially allow you to slam the car to the ground. And if you don't believe me, feel free to check out some of the customer submitted images here on the site or on the product page where owners have done exactly that. But aside from that height adjustment, the SR Sports here are also delivering 32-way dampening adjustment, something you don't normally see in this kind of price range. Now that's going to allow owners to essentially soften or stiffen your ride depending on your preferences and how you want to set the car up. Now those adjustable dampers will feature a monotube design along with a linear spring rate of 392 pounds for the front spring, 448 pounds for the rear. SR does also kick in some included caster camber plates on top here, which is nice, in addition to your adjustable end links over there as well. Again, nice inclusions for an entry-level coilover and something that you don't always see at this price point. Finally guys, these will be a direct replacement for the factory non-MagnaRide equipped S550s, which means the install, despite the 3 out of 3 wrench rating, will not be that bad. In fact, to give you a better idea of how it's all going to go down, here's a detailed walkthrough along with a quick tool breakdown.
Tools required for this installation: electric or air impacts, ball peen hammer, 1/2 inch drive, 3/8 inch drive, various extensions, wrenches from 12mm up to 19, supplied spanner wrenches, pry bar, breaker bar, sockets ranging from 10 to 24mm. This is a lug wrench, 6mm key, 5mm key. This is a 6mm key on a 3/8 drive, universal swivel socket, various extensions. All right, our first step is to pop the hood and then get the car in the air. We're gonna leave the hood open for this install. All right, we're gonna remove the wheel now. All right, so now we're at the top of the strut tower. We are going to loosen all 3 nuts and remove 2 of them. We're gonna keep one of them hand tight. And this is a 15mm socket up here. I'm gonna leave this one right here because it is gonna be the closest to reach while putting in that new coilover. We're going to set these off to the side. We will not reuse them as the new coilover kit comes with nuts for the top. All right, now we're going to be removing our sway bar end link with a 17mm wrench on the back side just to hold that stud. Now we are going to use an 18 deep well. And remove that nut. All right, now I'm going to pull the caliper off of the rotor. This is a 14 millimeter. There is a bolt on the top and bottom. Pull these out, and your caliper will swing away from your rotor. All right, what we're going to do now is remove the whole caliper bracket. That is on by two 15 millimeter bolts. There's one here, and then there's one at the bottom as well. All right, be ready to move your whole caliper and bracket over to the frame rail right here, or the K-member. And that way there's no stress on this brake line. And it's just going to remain there until we're ready to swap the coil over. And now you can just pull your rotor off. And you're going to have that much less weight that you have to worry about. Then we have easy access to our spindle nuts holding on that stock strut. All right, now we are going to remove our wheel speed sensors from our stock strut right there. There's one there, and then there's one on the bottom. They're both Christmas tree style. You can grab them like this, or you can grab a push pin removal tool and just working it out. And that way we're gonna have some room when this spindle does drop down. All right, now let's tackle these nuts right here. All right, now I have a 24 millimeter socket. We are going to take these nuts. We're not gonna remove them all the way. I'll show you what we are gonna do with them. We're gonna bring them down to right around there. So when we need to tap this out because they are press fit in there. So what we're actually gonna do is we're gonna take a hammer and just tap them out of there. You can see the splines right there. Now when we go to reinstall it, we're just gonna find those splines and then run that nut back down, and this will come through. All right, as you can see, we're gonna have that little play. Now we can remove those nuts. All right, so what we're gonna do now is remove these bolts. And I'm gonna use my body and my other hand because this spindle is gonna wanna drop down. So we're gonna control its fall. All right. Now what we gotta do now is get this sway bar end link through that. And then while reaching up top, that nut, that third nut that you have hand tight, we are going to remove that and remove our coilover and remove our strut and take it to the bench. All right, now that we have our stock strut assembly and our new coilover sitting side by side, you can see some of the drastic differences with the width of the coil here and there. There is total adjustability for this. So what we're gonna do now is unlock this collar here. And this is a daily driver car, so we don't want to lower it an extreme amount. This kit does offer up to a 3-inch drop. So what I'm gonna do here is we're only gonna go about 1.5 to 2 inch down. So again, I'm just looking at the top of this and that. We wanna get it about 1 inch, 1.5 inches difference. So right there is about good. We are going to lock our collar down now. We can do our final adjustments on the vehicle as well. So again, just locking that into place. This will have a little bit of movement, so when you go put it in, you can adjust it that way. So we're gonna take these covers off, expose our threads, and then get this installed on the car. All right, our sway bar end links are totally adjustable as well, so we do get brand new ones there. We're just gonna open it up a little bit and then put our jam nuts down. Again, if you were lowering this a lot, you would drop that all the way down. So again, we're only going to about 1 inch, 1.5 inch drop, and this should be good. All right, so now that we have our new coilover, we are going to put it up into the perch here. And I have 2 nuts in my hand. And I'm just gonna hand thread on there just to keep it from falling down. All right, now we're gonna go back under. Now again, this does have a little bit of movement, and we're gonna take one of our bolts for our spindle. We're gonna move it in to the spot it needs to be. Bring our spindle up a little bit and into there. Now we're just gonna start our bolt right there, put our other one in as well. Right. Now you can tap this, the head of the bolt with a hammer just to get those splines kind of started. And then when you put your nut on here and start driving it in, it'll draw the head of that bolt in. Watch. So we're just gonna start our nuts there. Again, watch the head of the bolt. Do that top and bottom. All right, now let's get the last nut on the top. All right, now using a 15mm socket, we are going to tighten up our top nuts. All right, now once we tightened our nuts for our spindle, we are going to install our sway bar end link. You're gonna need a 19mm wrench for this and a 6mm Allen key. So again, these are still loose. We're gonna get our final adjustment once we get the other side on. Start your nylock nut right there. And here at the bottom. All right, once you have your nylock nut started, I'm gonna be using a 6mm Allen key on my impact. Now this is backwards, so I have it on the loosening setting. All right, we're gonna do that top and bottom and for both sides. All right, now once your top and bottom nut for your sway bar end link are tight, we're just gonna tighten up the setting on the sway bar end link itself and then tighten up our jam nuts. Now again, we're gonna be using our 19mm wrench and just turning these to the right, top and bottom. It's gonna lock that adjustment in place. All right, now don't forget to reconnect your wheel speed sensor. SR Performance did put little cutouts for this in the back and on the bottom of the strut. So there is one down there as well. Just gonna put that in, all right. Now we can reassemble our rotor and caliper, get our wheel on and move to the rear. All right, rotor's going on. All right, now once you got your rotor on, you're gonna take the 2 bolts from the caliper bracket, swing the caliper back around and back to its home. Now it's gonna be tough to see, but I'm getting behind here just to get my bolt started. Then we're gonna pivot the bottom to where it needs to be, which is right there. Now using a 15mm socket, we are going to tighten these bolts back up. All right, and now we're also going to put back our brake line bracket. All right, now we're going to put our 10mm bolt back in for our brake line bracket. All right, now all the steps you just watched there, we're going to repeat on the other side and then move to the rear. All right, before we get underneath the vehicle, we have to remove this 13mm bolt holding our brake line bracket and these 2 19mm bolts holding the top of our shock. Let that just hang there. Now these are 19s. All right, set these to the side, you will reuse those. All right, now I'm gonna remove the 2 bolts holding the bottom of the stock shock out. Now hold on to these, you will reuse these. Now I'm just gonna slide our shock up. All right, now I'm gonna slide our shock out of the way and put this to the side as we need to take this top mount off. All right, now I removed the bracket from my brake line and the shock from the other side. Now what I'm gonna do is use a 13mm socket and loosen, but not remove these. And what these are for, this subframe bracket. We have to lower the subframe in order to get our stock spring out. All right, so we have the vehicle's subframe supported by 2 pull jacks. Now we're going to loosen, but not remove, this 21mm bolt. All right, we'll keep it there. Again, this is just hand tight. Now we're gonna move backwards, make sure that I have some support there, and we are going to remove this rear subframe bolt. You can actually see the subframe coming down a little bit. I'm going to make sure that it is supported on both sides. Continue to loosen this. I'm going to keep this to the side. Now watch what happens when I lower the pull jack. Watch this gap here. I'm going to do this evenly on both sides. Again, I'm going to remove this back subframe bolt. This one needs to loosen up a little bit more, so I'm going to raise this back up a little bit. Again, not removing that front subframe now. So I'm going to bring this down again. Now this spring, you may have to pull down on your lower control arm in order to get it out of this pocket. All right, so I'm going to bring this pull jack back up a little bit more and actually remove just one of these front lower subframe mounts just to get a little more travel, get that spring out. So with that removed, I'm going to, again, lower this subframe carefully. It is still very well supported on the other side. And what that should do is give us that needed space to turn this out of here. I'm going to use a pry bar, put it on the inside of this lower control arm. Just lift your stock spring out of the way. It's okay that our upper isolator fell out. We will not reuse that. All right, so you can see we have our stock shock and our new shock on the table. We do have to move this upper mounting point from our old one to our new one. We're just gonna take this cap off. And this is a 16mm nut. Remove that. We'll put that nut back on. Set this to the side because we are not gonna need that. Now, we're gonna take our new nut, and we're gonna leave that washer there. We're gonna take our new mount, bring it onto our new shock. Change sockets here to a 14mm deep socket. We're gonna tighten this down. All right, now your kit does come with new hardware, and one thing we need to do as well is adjust our shock. So I'm gonna loosen up this collar here. Again, we're not gonna be slamming this to the ground. We're going for about 1.5 inch drop. So let's extend this shock a little bit longer. So I'm just lining up our mounting points at the bottom and what it looks like at the top here. I'm gonna go a little bit more. I'm gonna lock that down. Take a spanner wrench here and lock it down. Again, you can lock this down in place in the car so it won't move around on you. This is just a preliminary lock. Now there is going to be a little play there, so you don't have to worry about lining it up or anything like that. All right, now that we have our shocks set up, it's time to set up our springs. Now you can tell the difference right here. This is set to the lowest setting. We're going to raise it up about another 1.5 inches take the new top mount off. Bring this down. It's right about there. And we're gonna bring our collar down and lock that into place with our spanner wrenches. One there, and one over here. Now you will not be able to adjust this on the car. Right. Now let's get this on the car. All right, so we're gonna put our new spring and top mount in. I'm going to bring in a crowbar or a pry bar, slip it through the lower control arm, and this is gonna act as a lever so I can get a little bit more play, so I can slide this cup over that mount. All right, now once you have it there, we are going to jack the subframe up a little bit more just to make sure we don't lose that. Now we are going to turn the spring in the bottom to make sure it is seated in the proper position, which is right there. And we are going to evenly raise the subframe back up. All right, now we are going to tighten up the subframe bolts back up. Now I'm just gonna hand tighten them right now just to make sure that we are in those threads, because you don't wanna cross thread these, and you don't wanna over tighten them. All right, now I am also going to put these 13mm bolts back in. All right, now we're gonna put the rear subframe bolt back in. I'm going to jack this into place, hand tighten that bolt back down. All right, so now we're gonna reinstall our shock. I left the bolts on here because it's gonna be easy to slip these into the spot. Now let those bolts fall through, start your nut. Now we are going to use a 15mm for the bolt and a 14 on the nut. So I'm going to put my 15 on the top, tighten the 14 on the bottom. Okay. Now to help guide the top of this shock, I have a pole jack sitting at the bottom, and I'm going to lift up on it. Now just enough so I can get my bolt started and through there, but not enough to take the vehicle off the jack stands or lift like we are on. We'll start these bolts. All right, now all the steps you just saw, we are going to repeat on the other side, and then get the wheels on the vehicle and get it down on the ground. All right, that's gonna wrap up my install of the SR Performance Sport Coilover Kit. For all things Mustang, keep it here at AmericanMuscle.com.